The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of the Hard Rock Empire on this Sunday, June the 29th, the last Sunday of June as we head into July next week. Great to have you along with us, Matt, here in the studio for another edition. This is episode number 71 of the Hard Rock Empire. And tonight we're going to be talking about the music of June the 6th. And it was a really good week in music. Definitely more stuff this week than I think we probably could have picked. We'll talk about some of the honorable mentions because there's some big name acts, a couple of bands that we've talked about before on this podcast. But we have four really good albums to talk about. Of course, we've got news headlines, we've got the Vault, we've got the Power Trio, we've got all that good stuff that we bring you each and every week. And we'll get that started here for the last time in the month of June. Joining me in the studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. It's been a while, but back here and ready to talk about some music. There was quite a bit of good stuff this week. I kind of settled on what I wanted to go with pretty quickly, but I feel like I left a lot of good stuff on the table.
Yeah, it was definitely not a thin week as far as quality this week. There was definitely a lot of stuff that I think people will find entertaining, and we'll talk about some of that when we get to the new music. And of course, I will always, as I always do, we'll put the playlist that Mike puts together in the chat for both Twitch and YouTube, so you can find some things that you like on this week's playlist. But we'll get to a few news headlines starting off, and nothing really major going on in the news, so just a couple of lighter news stories, if you will. And the first one, just kind of noteworthy, because Iron Maiden, actually yesterday, performed at London Stadium, home of West Ham's football club, and it was the largest crowd that they've ever drawn in the UK when they were the headlining act, and it was not a festival, which is, so there's a lot of qualifiers there, but obviously, festivals sometimes have, well over 100,000, sometimes more people in attendance, but this was them as a headline act. And they drew somewhere between 70 and 75,000 fans to this show. And obviously, this is great to see. We love Iron Maiden. And it's one of those situations where this is the kind of the beginning of a tour, and they're going to be playing more of these big stadiums. So I have a feeling, these numbers may continue to go up as they continue on. But I think, you brought up an interesting point off the air that, it was coinciding with a big festival that they decided not to play in their instead. But it's great to see that, in 2025 that Iron Maiden is still drawing these kinds of crowds, and they're specifically coming there to see Iron Maiden. It's not a festival situation. So that's really great to see.
Yeah, and that being said, it is kind of in their backyard. They mentioned in the article that Steve Harris, Dave Murray, and Adrian Smith, as well as former drummer, now retired Nico McBrain, were all born and raised in kind of that surrounding area. So not that they don't draw a huge crowd wherever they go anyway, but I mean, it's got to be doubly special when you do it basically as like a homecoming show. And yeah, they're one of those bands that's kind of on my list and really high up as far as bands I've not seen live that I still need to. And I was looking at the track list for the set, or the set list for the show, and they're never going to play every song you want to hear, but man, it was solid.
Yeah, it's another one of those bands, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. We were talking about Metallica. You're talking about some of these bands that just have so many hit songs that it's impossible in a one concert set to play them all. And they played 17 songs, so they certainly did a pretty good job of covering a lot of ground. But yeah, there's always going to be a couple that are left off. But honestly, if I get to see them live and this is the concert they play, I would walk away feeling pretty satisfied that I got to hear a lot of the songs that I'd want to hear live, in my one chance maybe to see them at some point.
I was looking into Glastonbury because I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Even looking at the Wikipedia to see like the stage breakdown and who's performing, it's just hard to follow. I don't know why the Wikipedia formatting is so weird on it. And they have bands that are like bold at the top of each day and each stage, and I assume they're the headliners. But like, they have a stage called Pyramid Stage, which the Friday headliner was the 1975.
I've heard of them. I couldn't tell you anything about them, but I've heard of them.
They performed ahead of Biffy Clyro, Alanis Morissette.
Oh, wow.
And that's really about all that I recognize there. Saturday, Neil Young and the Chrome Hearts, who I get that he's a big deal, but I would certainly rather see one of the prior artists on that stage, John Fogerty. That been a better act, I think. Sunday, Olivia Rodrigo. Rod Stewart performed before her, which would have been kind of cool. Let's see. On the other stage, that's what it's called, other stage. Loyal Carner, never heard of that person. Busta Rhymes performed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Franz Ferdinand. On Saturday, you had Charlie XCX. I don't think I know what that is. Weezer performed earlier the day on that stage. Sunday, we had the Prodigy headlining. Which
nice.
Are they really headliners now? I mean, like...
Probably not at this point.
Their front man passed away a few years back. Snow Patrol I've heard of. Not really my style. Turnstile. Then we have the West Holtz stage.
Okay.
Which In Vogue performed. They were not a headliner, but that's the only act on that stage on Friday I've heard of. Let's see... Not a whole lot on Saturday and Sunday that jumps out at me. Bob Villain, I don't know who he is.
I feel like that band has been in the headlines for
really. That's a great name.
Reason, yeah. I feel like there's a story about that band for some reason. I don't know that it's necessarily good news, but I feel like that name I came across it when doing some research for the show. So
other headliners, man, I don't know any of those. That's frightening. On the acoustic stage, Ani DeFranco, who was popular at one point in time. Let's see. The Avalon stage, you have the Fratellis. I've heard of that band. Yeah, then on the left field stage, you had Grandson, who I think might have been at Sonic Temple. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like somewhere Iron Maiden would perform.
Yeah, I always got the vibe that it wasn't like Coachella level, like indie bands, but there were more so than like, Sonic Temple. Like it was clearly a step or two that direction instead of, like you said, to place an Iron Maiden. Because let's be real, based on some of the acts that did not headline, it's reasonable to think that maybe Maiden doesn't even headline one of the stages on this show. So it's like, oh, well, let's go do our own show and bring in 75,000 people and we're going to be the main attraction. So
it's just a lesson that no matter how much music I listen to, there will always be the majority of it I know nothing about.
That is a fact. And it's impossible.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, you'd have to have a job where your full-time job was to listen to all the music, and you still wouldn't listen to all the music.
You would hate it because a lot of that music clearly isn't your style of music, or you'd know about it already.
Just based on the stuff you have to listen to every week, like for this.
At least it's all typically in the metal field.
Yes.
Like, I may not enjoy all of it, but I would take it in a heartbeat over a lot of the other music being created.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. But yeah, so kudos to Iron Maiden. We'll probably talk about them again a little bit later on in the podcast, but it's great to see them, and Mike and I are both on the same page that we need to see those guys at some point before they decide to hang it up. Another band that we talk about a lot on this podcast is Megadeth, and we actually talked a little bit about this, kind of not directly about this box set, but about the fact that there probably would be a box set. And that was the news that they were going to release an ultra limited edition of Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good 40th anniversary box set. I had planned on talking about this in the realm of kind of getting Mike's thoughts on the value and the cost of this. But in the end, as we talk about whether we're talking about sports contracts or whether we're talking about whatever it is, the consumer or whoever's paying the money will decide whether the value of something is actually worth it. And in this case, because it was only 350 copies, and you can definitely take a look on the Blabbermouth link what was in this and what it looks like. I mean,
it looks really cool. I'm not going to argue.
It does, for sure. Whether it's actually worth the money they were charging, 350 people at least thought so because it is sold out. But compared to other box sets, and we talk about them from time to time on this podcast, it felt like this one might have been a little bit light, but as I think you're going to talk about, it's almost understandable with this particular release that there wasn't maybe like and it's a little unfair comparing it to the Load box set that we talked about a couple weeks ago. But if in your mind you're thinking this is what a collector's edition box set is compared to this album in particular for Megadeth, that would have been a little bit more difficult to come up with new stuff for this album.
Yeah, absolutely. Comparing it to Load is difficult, like you mentioned. Obviously, when Load was created, Metallica was already just a huge worldwide act. So, and it was also 11 years after Killing Is My Business. So it stands to reason they would have a lot more kind of in the tank. Like, hey, we have an entire demo album we can release with it, a bunch of live tracks. You can create the largest box set humanly possible with additional music. I don't think you really have that opportunity with Killing Is My Business. This is an album that's been re-released at least 3 times already. They've pretty much scraped the bottom of the barrel as far as what they can offer you. So really the only thing you can do is what kind of collectibles can we throw together in a box. You decide to only make 350 of them, which basically means you can charge about anything when you're Megadeth. Like, you have a large enough following that there are at least 350 people out there that will pay top dollar for Megadeth memorabilia, and I think that's kind of what we got here. It's, a gold vinyl LP, which is really cool looking, signed lithograph, a slip mat for your record player, a metal laser engraved business card, Killing Is My Business, why not?
Sure.
An embroidered patch, a flag of the original backdrop, which is pretty cool. 2-sided challenge coin, and a 20-page book. So is that $350 worth? Not to me, but it was to enough people, so it sold. Kind of going into the music side of it again, like I mentioned, this album's been through the ringer already. You had the original 1985 version. You had kind of the second pressing of that same version where they had to remove their cover of These Boots because Lee Hazelwood wasn't too fond of what they did lyrically with it. You had the 2002 reissue, which was remastered with a censored, altered version of These Boots on it, as well as demos of Last Rites, Love to Death, Mechanics, and Skull Beneath the Skin. Then kind of what was supposed to be the definitive edition, and I think musically is the 2018 The Final Kill, has, again, remastered new version of These Boots with unaltered lyrics. It's a faithful cover. You have live tracks of Last Rites, Love to Death, Killing Is My Business, Skull Beneath the Skin, Rattlehead, Chosen Ones, Looking Down the Cross, Mechanics, basically the whole album, and the demos from the 2002 re-release, and that's, as far as what you're getting music-wise, that's still kind of the one to go to. And then obviously you had this celebratory 40th anniversary vinyl with all the goodies. To me, I still look at that Half Sumo Megadeth collaboration for some of the merchandise, the T-shirts and whatnot, paying tribute to some of the old logos and old designs. To me, that's a more reasonable investment into my Megadeth fandom.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think most people will as well. And undoubtedly, at least some of these 350 copies were probably bought up by scalpers because they buy everything. And,
sure.
Again, when you have such a limited run of literally anything, there's going to be value on the scalper market because there's going to be somebody who's just dying to get their hands on this stuff that is a definitive collector that has to have it all, that won't have gotten one of these 350 copies, and now they're going to be... And I didn't check eBay to see if any of these are up yet. It might be a little early since they don't come out until later, but...
It's hard to say. I mean, people had their Switch 2s on eBay right after the pre-order went live, so it's certainly possible they're already basically, hey, I got my copy guaranteed, I'm selling it to you already.
That's entirely possible, so it'd be curious to see, what ends up happening with those 350 copies if some of them do show up on eBay, and if... potentially we're going to see a big markup on the cost because, again, if they're not going to make any more of these, there is some value in the scarcity of them. It's just natural economics. So, not curious. I assume you looked it up. Is there?
I'm not seeing any yet.
Okay.
I'm seeing some of just general stuff. Let's see. Someone selling the first press of the 1985 vinyl for $300.
Ooh, wow.
That would actually be a pretty cool collector's item. Let's see. A vinyl of the Final Kill version for $90. I don't know if that's still available just in general. Another one for $85. But yeah, a lot of stuff here, but I do not see the the anniversary set yet.
Yeah, honestly, you could make an argument that the first press of the 1985 version might actually be a better use of your $300.
I think it'd be more meaningful of an investment.
Yeah.
As far as this is the real first print of this icon, a great debut record as far as debuts from bands in the 80s go. Killing Is My Business was right up there.
Yeah, no question about it. So we'll kind of keep tabs on that and see if some copies start showing up on eBay as we get a little closer. Again, it's not coming out until October, so we'll also see if the band comes back and maybe releases some of the special edition items, maybe as a one-off on their website or something like that to allow people who maybe missed out on this to get their hands on it. But yeah, great album and really cool to see all the new merch coming out. And again, like Mike said, the Half Sumo stuff that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that's definitely worth your attention, not just for Megadeth, but for other bands as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a band that Mike has near and dear to his heart. Figured it was worth bringing this up on the podcast, and that is GWAR. The announcement released through Blabbermouth that GWAR is going to be heading out on tour, probably continuing tour as it stands. They are going to start a tour in October in Salt Lake City. They'll be touring with Helmet, The Dwarves, and Blood Vulture.
Best kind.
I've heard of Helmet. I'm not real familiar with the other two bands, but
heard of Killer Dwarfs, but I'm not familiar with the Dwarves.
I don't know if there was some sort of lawsuit maybe there. No, I don't. But the tour is going to go all the way through November the 22nd in Norfolk, Virginia. Mostly, it looks like starting out west and in Canada. A couple dates in the Midwest, then kind of going through the South and then up the East Coast. So if you're interested in checking it out, obviously we have the link to the Blabbermouth article that includes the tour dates. But general thoughts on this tour, and I'm sure you can explain it a little better than I can.
Yeah, so this is the Return of GWAR tour. GWAR being essentially a character from his own song and the album America Must Be Destroyed, a giant dinosaur that's addicted to crack, I believe. Yeah, I don't know if it's been a while since they've played that. I can't imagine. It's a pretty popular song. But on top of it being the 40th anniversary of GWAR, you have also this returning character. You have a comic that they're coming out with. It's a 32-page comic chronicling the return of GWAR. It's going to be released alongside a music collection, which will have 3 new GWAR songs and 4 live tracks. Checking out their website, you can kind of purchase it and things around it in numerous different configurations. You have the hardbound comic with an etched record for $75. You have the etched record for $25. CD for $15, a comic for $20, plush toy for $50, numerous shirts for $30, hoodies at $60, a mouse pad, which seems kind of wild, for $20, digital download of the music for $10, and a poster for $25. Looking at it, and obviously America Must Be Destroyed was a great album, and that's a classic song, but just looking at the prices, like, I mentioned I think it was a week or so ago when we were talking about kind of the Half Sumo Megadeth collaboration, talking about the prices being what I think are reasonable. And, here's GWAR not even charging that much. Their prices seem totally beyond reasonable, which is great to see. At this point for band shirts, I assume 40 is kind of the starting price, and they're selling their T-shirts at $30. The hoodies at $60, which I think is another really good deal. They're clearly not gouging people, and they're giving people a wide variety of ways to support their efforts, and they're a band that's been doing it for a long time. I'm kind of excited about this. I might have to check it out as well as the comic, but just really cool to celebrate, and glad they're still out there kicking.
Well, if you've ever wanted to take that trip to the last remaining Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon, they will be hitting up Bend on October the 26th.
That would be the place to see them, I feel like.
A 2-for-1 deal there. You get to see GWAR again, and you get to see the last Blockbuster as well. So
fitting, because if it wasn't for Blockbuster, I may not be a GWAR fan. So
there's some sort of tie there, possibly.
Crazy how that works.
But check out the tour dates if it is near you. Kind of, again, missing kind of the upper Midwest on this tour, but they come through this area fairly regularly. So if you aren't in the line of this tour, there's odds are they'll probably do something in 26 that'll be a little closer to your area, but definitely check that out. And again, tickets will go on sale. Actually, it went on sale on Friday. So if you're in the area, you can just go ahead and get your tickets now. Check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can listen to previous episodes of the Nerdcast Empire. We will be back tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. We got some nerdy news to catch up on tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We will not have an episode on Friday because, of course, Friday is the 4th of July, so we will be off. But we will be back with you once again next Sunday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. It'll be the music of June the 13th coming up next week, so we encourage you to check it out. And, of course, it's going to have some big shoes to fill because this week's playlist was really, really good. A lot of really good acts this week, and I will be pasting that playlist into the chat as we speak, both on YouTube and on Twitch. And, of course, you know, as we talk about every week, Mike goes through, pulls a list of bands that are releasing new albums for a given date. That date in question this week is June the 6th, and then he'll pull a track from each of those new albums, and he will put it on this playlist. He goes through all of them, so you don't have to, but you can if you would like. You can go through the playlist. Then we choose 4 albums to spotlight on this week's podcast. If you're listening live on Twitch or on YouTube, you'll get to hear clips of some of the albums on the podcast. Of course, if you're listening where you get your favorite podcast or on the VOD, sometimes those clips may not be there. So always try to join us live at 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Sundays on the East Coast of the U.S. This was, I thought, a really good week for music. There was a lot of really good stuff. There were some big-name bands that released. The one album we actually have talked about on this podcast that I haven't had the chance to listen to all the way through yet, but I'm excited to do so, was the tribute to Triumph. That would be one that in a given week I would probably pick, but again, we do sometimes try to stay away from the bands or the albums that we think are going to do really big numbers. But, you know, before we get to your picks, Mike, let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the other stuff on the list this week that we didn't get to. I know Terra Maze, who's a band I picked last year for a new album, had a new album out, and I haven't had a chance to listen to all of it yet, but what I've listened to of it is good. Anything else kind of jump out at you before we get to the picks?
Yeah, I'm certainly not surprised to hear that was good. What I've heard of it was certainly solid. Let's see here. One that kind of jumped out at me, an Australian metal band, Battlesnake, had an album, which was pretty decent. Blackfire Rising had an EP, Blackfire Rising EP.
That was good.
Band from the UK. Let's see, Inglorious from Frontiers had an album, V. It's Frontiers.
Yeah, the track I heard was really good.
Yeah. Let's see, a post-hardcore band from Spain, Not Yet, which was really difficult to find.
I'm sure.
No Search likes you trying to find a band just called Not Yet. Like it was an adventure, but enjoyable. You mentioned Terra Maze, obviously the tribute to Triumph. Also, a Cleveland-based post-grunge alt-metal band, Truss, has had their new album Fluorescence out. That was solid and always cool to see a band from our home state doing something good. But yeah, there was quite a few out there to pick from. And like I said, I kind of settled on my 2 picks pretty early, so I didn't get a chance to fully engross myself in the other stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff. Definitely encourage people to check out a lot of the albums. And, of course, as we talk about all the time, if you find something you like, pick it up. Go see these bands if they're on tour near you. I know a lot of the bands we pick maybe aren't from the U.S., but if you're not from the U.S., maybe they'll tour near you, or they might come over here at some point. But definitely check them out. A lot of great music. But it is time to get to the new music of June the 6th. Mike, you're going to get us started once again. What do you have for your first pick this week?
Yeah, so for this week, this was a band who the band name themselves kind of jumped out at me when I was putting together the playlist for the week. I'm thankful that when I saw the name of the band, I saw the record label, a label I'm familiar with. This definitely panned out and ended up being really cool. It is the 6th full-length album from a horror punk band out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They are Rise From Your Grave, and the album is The New Flesh Reborn.
Yeah, you know, when I see a band with a name like this, sometimes I get nervous because sometimes those are the bands that don't sound good. But when you look at the logo of this, there's like, oh, this has got a chance. And it turns out it actually is really good.
Yeah, the fact you can read the logo is usually a step in the right direction. But yeah, I've listened to stuff a little bit of stuff from the label We Are Horror Records. They had an album from the band Boogeyman that I listened to last year that was really strong. So I kind of had my hopes up about this, and it turned out pretty well for me. Like I mentioned, this is the 6th album from these guys. Their Bandcamp refers to them as thrash-infused horror punk from the Void. In this case, and not surprisingly, the Void is actually Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Who knew? I could have guessed. It would have been on the short list, but that's what we found out. When I saw the band name, I immediately thought of the game Altered Beast back on the Sega, which also then made me think of the anime Uncle from Another World. All great things, and the music just kept going with that. The band is made up of Tom Gaffron on lead vocals, Brandon Alonzo on guitars and backing vocals, Adam Kephart on bass and backing vocals, and Justin Fantuzzo on drums and backing vocals. In all seriousness about their sound, they definitely do lean more into thrash than some of their contemporaries. Given I'm still kind of a novice in the horror punk subgenre, I can really only compare them to a band like Boogeyman, who I really loved their album, but while they have similar themes, Rise From Your Grave definitely feels more like a metal band doing horror punk as opposed to something less metal, more on kind of the punk or any other genre of music, any other rock styling. Both have great sounds, but they're different for sure. Another cool thing about this band I noticed on their Bandcamp, and I wish every artist would do this, they list on the Bandcamp who created the album cover art, which I think is always cool, especially when a band like this who have kind of that horror theme going on. The cover art to the album is a big deal. That's really important, especially in the day of digital music, because that might be your only visual interaction with their sound. In this case, the art is really cool, and it's done by someone named Monster Mark Kosabuki. I would love to see that become kind of the standard where you're always calling out, hey, this is the guy that designed our artwork for this album. Going into it, it's a lot of it feels very thrashy, but not metal thrashy. It's kind of a different thing, but still enjoyable for me. One track that kind of stood out to me was the final track, As I Crumble, because musically it kind of sounded like the Scorpion song Coming Home, which just seemed totally out of left field for this band, but it's a heavier version, but still had a similar feeling. Overall, the standout tracks include The Creature, Summer's Over, It Cannot Be, Scream Evil, It's Me, Pieces of You, and the track that I picked to listen to this evening, the song The Deep.
Check these guys out. This is Rise From Your Grave with their new album, The New Flesh Reborn. This is track number 7 on this album, The Deep. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, it's got a great sound to it, and you mentioned the Void maybe being Pittsburgh. I was just in the Pittsburgh area a couple months ago in Moon Township. I didn't see a Void there, but it's a big city, so it's possible that it was there. I really like these guys' sound. Like you said, it definitely has the vibe of a thrash band without it doesn't really hit you over the head like thrash bands can. I think I don't want to say it's melodic thrash. That's not really, I don't think that's a thing, but it definitely feels a little more, there's a little more of a vibe to it. But overall, I think it's really good. The vocals are great. The guitars are great. It's got a really well-balanced sound, and I'm kind of excited to get a chance to listen to more of this album.
Yeah, that being said, the track that I did pick did kind of have a little more of a power punk, like pop punk vibe to it, maybe compared to the rest of the album. But yeah, they can write really catchy hooks and choruses, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to getting a chance to listen to the rest of this. You can as well. Rise From Your Grave with The New Flesh Reborn, Mike's first pick this week. As always, Mike, you've got 2 picks. What do you have for pick number 2?
Yeah, so for pick number 2, we are looking at the sophomore LP from the Thomas Carlsen's Transmission band in quotes. The album is Clockwork Sky.
Yeah, obviously, you'll explain why band is in quotation marks there, but Thomas Carlsen, really talented guy. I feel like we've even maybe talked about him before on the podcast, and this is one of those just projects, I guess, if you will, that is among the best things that are these kinds of things are the things that we really enjoy, and it's always a lot of fun to get a chance to listen to these musical geniuses come up with just some sort of amazing creative project.
Yeah, this dude definitely wrote something tremendous. Their Bandcamp, or his Bandcamp, refers to them as a melodic heavy metal powerhouse from Norway. What you dig a little deeper into the Bandcamp, you'll see that it's mainly a one-man project. He does all the music and lyrics, not singing, but writing. He plays all the instruments. There are some co-writing credits, which according to the write-up that Metal Planet Music had, are his father, Paul. He co-wrote a couple of the songs with him. He brought in 4 different guest vocalists to do vocals across the album. Some of the tracks are instrumental, but the singers involved, we have Sebastian Palma from Blizzard Hunter. He's the vocalist from Peru. Alti Golassen from the band Power Paladin, guy from Iceland. From France, we have Arnold Menard from Scale of Akon. And from Greece, we have Mike Levas from the band Silent Winter, and they're all just outstanding. This album is the follow-up to his 2023 work, A Brave Horizon. On the Bandcamp, when he kind of discusses the sound on the new album, saying, the writing sessions resulted in my most anthemic and hooky tunes yet. It blends the arena rock of the 80s with modern age power metal in a big way. And yeah, that's totally a fair self-assessment. The vocals do a huge thing, but when you listen to the album, you can definitely tell that the guitar work and the instrumentation is kind of the main character here. It starts with the song Hourglass with this really slow melody that builds into this chugging metal riff, and then this kind of riff that reminds you that, yeah, this is a virtuoso that happens to be writing an album. It's really awesome, but you just immediately think this is arena rock meets power metal, and I'm totally for it. Standout tracks on the album include the songs Hourglass, Thunderbird, The Crimson Cross, Midnight Queen, and the track that I picked out, the song One with the Storm.
Check this out now. It's Thomas Carlsen's Transmission. This is the new release, Clockwork Sky, and the third track off of that release is One with the Storm. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, when you listen to this, it's almost impossible for anything that sounds like this to not get picked on our podcast. Yeah. This is pretty much, if you had to take all the picks we've made over 71 episodes and try to congeal them into one song, like, it's probably going to sound a lot like these guys, or this guy. But just obviously a lot of talent there. The exact kind of music that I really enjoy listening to. This was kind of a no-brainer for one of us this week because, like I said, it's, you've got your melodic stylings, you've got your power metal, you've got just an incredible talent, the instrumentation, the vocals. It's the whole package for sure.
Yeah, and it's not all like hyper fast power metal. Like, it's not really that route. Like the track that we listened to, the beginning of that track starts with like what sounds like an AOR synth intro. Like, it's just it feels like that natural progression of what those bands were doing mixed with power metal that could still headline arenas. It's just it's fascinating, and it's not a super long album, but man, it's so good.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Thomas Carlsen's Transmission, his new album Clockwork Sky, out on June the 6th. Definitely worth a listen. I have 2 albums as well this week, and we are starting off by heading to Germany. This is a German rock band from Kaiserslautern. This is Winterland with Life's What You Make It. A lot of really good choices this week in the kind of melodic category. In fact, we just heard one with Mike's second pick. This is another one. This is a very interesting duo. The guitarist Marcus Pfeiffer, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. He's a guy who's pretty busy. He's involved with some bands, including Lazarus Dream and Mystery Moon. Stephen Hugo, who's the singer, and he's also a actor, a musical director, and a singer-songwriter. He's done some theater work, including on Sweeney Todd. So this is a guy who's definitely got the pipes to do kind of the wide range of music. Hugo's also the frontman of the tribute band Ziggy Stardust and part of the live cast of the metal opera Disperia. They're joined on this album by Bernd Schreiber, who plays bass, and they really put something together that's just got a really great sound, a great melodic rock sound. I know that there are times we'll try to pick up physical releases of these bands. These guys have certainly done something that makes it even a little more attractive to try to pick up the physical release. They've added 4 tracks that are physical release only, which is an interesting kind of way to maybe get people to buy CDs, which I'm all for. They have done 4 cover songs, including one of my favorite Duran Duran songs, Union of the Snake, Warriors of the Wasteland from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Everything Counts from Depeche Mode, and, of course, Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart. You can't beat that. And, I tried to even do a quick YouTube search for Union of the Snake to see if somebody would have uploaded it. They haven't, so that's kudos, I guess, for that not making it online.
Great song.
Great song, and definitely makes me want to pick this up because the rest of all their stuff is really good. Definitely interested in hearing their cover takes, but it's kind of the way you get a lot of bonus tracks in Japan. Well, this could be a new thing where these bands are encouraging people to buy physical by giving you some extra tracks on the CDs. But they're kind of flying under the radar. Not a lot of listens on YouTube Music for these guys, and it's a shame because they're really talented. And hopefully this is maybe a breakthrough moment for them with this album. Standout tracks include I Want Out, I Don't Know, Through the Barricades, which is a Spandau Ballet cover, which is kind of a ballad at the end of this album, but they really did an amazing job with it. And then the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is the title track, Life's What You Make It. So check these guys out now, Winterland, with the album Life's What You Make It. This is the title track. It is the 4th track on the album. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Got to leave your fears behind. Every path leads somewhere. Make up your mind. There are days in your life when you're feeling down, all alone and you're afraid to drown. You think there's no way to escape it. There are times in your life when you're feeling small. Don't give up when you're about to fall. You've got the power to change it. Life's what you make it. All your life you feel trapped.
Yeah, this was actually like the last highlighted track on our playlist, and I'd had a few albums already that I had highlighted that I wanted to go back and listen to, and I heard this track, and I was just kind of blown away by it, and they made for a very easy first choice. They've got great harmonies. I love the guitar work in here. Definitely got that power metal type guitar in the background. Really good stuff from these guys. I'd love to see them become kind of a bigger thing out of Germany. But Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, this was really solid. The last part of the alphabet of the list this week had a lot of really good stuff. To the point where I wasn't really expecting any more once I got to like the letter T, and they just kept coming. And this one near the end of the alphabet just kind of reached that next level for me, where it was like, not only is this good, this is something I need to go and seriously give a listen to. And yeah, just another example of just the great music we had this week.
Yeah, for sure. And again, definitely interested in hearing those cover songs as well. But even if you just get the digital version, it's a really good album. So definitely check out Winterland, my first pick this week. As always, I have 2 picks, and we are going to jump into Italy, another one of our favorite countries on this podcast, and we're going to hear from one of our favorite guys in Italy coming up with this band. We'll actually hear from him twice because we're going to talk about him in my vault pick as well. This is a band formed in 2012 in Italy. They are Nastyville with the album Rebirth. This is their 4th studio album. It appears that their band members have given themselves either English-sounding names as nicknames or in some cases just nicknames, but I'll give you kind of what the description was I saw on the website. Vocalist is Marco Lirashi or Mark Lee. I see why, because I'm probably struggling to pronounce them. Guitars, David Visson or Dave Wild. Guitar, Christian Di Gaudenzi or Dega. The bass, Carlo Giordano or The Horv. And drummer is Christian Tabita or Chris Tabit, which is very catchy. And initially they were rooted in more of a modern glam sound. They've kind of shifted with this album. There's definitely a little bit of an edge to this music, but it also still has those anthemic choruses and melodic power that have kind of defined the band. This album was recorded at Ivory Tears Music Works recording studio in Soma, Lombardo. Produced by Nastyville and mixed and engineered by one of our all-time favorite guys, Alessandro Del Vecchio, whose production elevates the band's sound to new heights without losing its raw impact. Renowned for their stage performance, they have toured and shared the stage with bands such as Skid Row, Crash Diet, Enough's Enough, Atom Bomb, John Corabi, Simon Wright, and more recently the Dead Daisies and Steel Panthers. So you kind of get where they're going for. It's another really catchy album. You can definitely hear a few of the sleazy type elements still in there. Definitely some catchy choruses I think would make for really good live sound. But again, everybody in the band did a great job here, but the vocals kind of put this over the top, just take it to a totally different level and really made this an enjoyable listen. Standout tracks include Rocking Through the Night, I Miss You, Unstoppable, and the song we're going to listen to is Power to the People. So check these guys out. It is Nastyville with their new album, Rebirth. And this is the song off of this album. We're going to listen to the second track. It is Rebirth. So let's listen to, Power to the People. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. But yeah, really good stuff from these guys. And of course, as Mike kind of noted, when you have Alessandro Del Vecchio come in and master it, that kind of tells you that it's going to have a level of polish on it that's probably going to allow it to be really good. And I think these guys have done an amazing job with this album. Mike, your thoughts on Nastyville?
Yeah, I didn't do enough research to see who all was involved with it, but it definitely stood out to me as I was going through the list. And another thing that stood out, and it's another one of the things on my list of I wish bands would do this more often, is just the work that they put into their music videos feels like something you wouldn't see in 2025. It's just in a time where music videos don't seem to be super relevant. It's just cool. They had a couple videos, one for that song, one for what was the other one?
I remember seeing it on their website.
Rocking Through the Night.
Yeah.
It's just like, I wish more bands would do that. Again, in a time where more and more people are doing digital only, it's just a cool visual for bands that maybe never will tour through here. This is your only chance to kind of see what it looks like when they're doing anything creative, and more of that would be cool.
Well, and again, I know you've talked about it before. As you're going through these playlists and listening to all this music, we do have weeks where there's a lot of really good stuff, and when you're looking for something to differentiate one band to another, there's a couple quick ways. You've got the album art, which you talked about, and some of it is really amazing, and that just, okay, I've got to check this out. And there's music videos. If you just do a simple lyric video that's just a screen in the album, that's fine. If that's what you can do, then that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But when you have these bands that spend the money and the time to actually produce something that's really slick, it does kind of grab your attention. Like, oh, well, these guys are really serious. I definitely need to check these guys out.
I love the bands that do real music videos like that. Another thing that I love now, maybe not in a positive light, but it's kind of that, yeah, you should do a lyric video instead of doing this, are the AI videos.
Yeah.
Because I'll watch, the second I notice one of those is clearly AI, the first thing I do is jump down to the comments because I know it's going to be kind of a storm, and it is. I mean, there are people that might love the band and would say so much in their comments, and they're just disgusted that that's the route they went for their music video.
I think I'm especially frustrated when we get to, and we've had this happen in the 70 weeks plus that we've done this, where it's a big name artist, where they've got money. It's somebody who was in a big band and now he's doing some sort of side project, and it's just really crappy AI video. And it's just like, man, you of all people have the money to actually hire people and make this video, and this is what you decided to do. I don't care if your music sounds good or not. I'm not going to pick it. Like,
I just think if you did a tier list of things to do with your music video, that's always going to be below pretty much everything else, including just using live footage from whatever tour you were on. Like, there's so many ways to piece together a video that doesn't necessarily even require a lot of effort, but I think still leaves fans with a better taste in their mouth than what. So, I mean, a lot of the AI videos just look bad.
They do.
Like, it would be one thing if you could do it in a way where you couldn't immediately identify it as AI, maybe that would be one thing, but they're just weird. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. If you're out there and you're listening, definitely, you're better off just to put your album artwork up on the screen and just play the music behind it. But again, it is easier now than ever to shoot high quality video. Everybody's walking around with a 4K camera in their pocket in their cell phone. Shoot a video of a live, obviously you have photographers there, have them shoot video, piece together a music video out of live footage. One, if you're a band who's playing maybe kind of throwback music, it's going to throw back to an era where that was really common.
Yeah.
And two, I'm going to respect it because you're at least trying to put together something that looks like artwork and not like crap.
Better yet, if you're performing in front of people and those people have their phones out, outsource making the video to them. Like, have them send you whatever footage they shot. You'll include their name in the credits, and you can basically piecemeal a music video together of live footage shot by fans.
Yeah, it's
Like,
actually
I think
a brilliant
that would be really
idea.
cool.
Yeah, it's a free idea from us to you out there as a band. Yeah, we see WWE do that all the time with their big moments. Here's how every fan reacted to it.
But the other thing you mentioned as far as like well-known successful acts using AI, I mean, that's inexcusable, but I think the sad thing is when the bands who aren't at that level do it, because I don't know if they realize kind of the goodwill that gets burned with people. And maybe the reactions aren't equivalent to the infraction that's being done. Like, maybe people are a little too harsh on bands for using AI, but that's just the reality they are. And you kind of have to realize that whatever you're saving on one end, you're making a lot of people mad, whether it's justified or not.
Yeah, and big artists can probably get away with it in a lot of cases because they're big artists. Small artists, again, like you talked about, so many of these bands we come across each and every week have one chance to make a first impression with us as we listen to these playlists. If they do really cool artwork, if they make a really cool music video, that could edge them a little bit ahead of some of these other bands that we come across. So just something to keep in mind. Again,
Internet criticism isn't typically rational. So you could be a band that's struggling to sell 50 copies of an album, and if someone sees you're using AI in a video, they treat it like Metallica going after Napster. I don't think it's a totally fair reaction, but that's just where we are.
Yeah, and maybe someday that'll change, but as of the current situation in 2025, that is exactly where we are.
Yeah.
But just a little bonus thought there. But kudos to Nastyville. It really did great
really
work.
Cool videos.
check those guys out. Really good stuff from them. That takes care of our new music. This week it is time to go into Vault, where Mike and I will each give you a classic album you need to check out. And Mike is going through his vault. He has turned the corner on the halfway point and is on the way home now. He's up to the letter Q for this week. Mike, what do you have in the vault for us?
Yeah, so kind of repeating a band here that I chose in a prior run through the alphabet for the vault. With the letter Q, it's difficult. It's pretty much either this band, Queen, or Quiet Riot's Greatest Hits. That's pretty much what's in my vault.
Yeah.
I feel like I've talked about Queen more, oddly enough, than for a band that I haven't had on my vault any week. I feel like they come up a lot. So what I ended up going with was the other band that's in my collection under the letter Q, and I'm going with a lesser known album of theirs. I could have gone with the low hanging fruit. I think I talked about Empire already. So instead of doing Mindcrime, I am going to go with their album from 1997. It is their 6th studio album. They are Queensryche, and the album is Here in the Now Frontier.
Yeah, this is a good album, and I think it does fly under the radar. I mean, because some of their albums, I think, are bigger, more commercial successes, but this is a really good choice.
It's kind of interesting because every now and then you'll hear Queensryche like on Hair Nation or something, and most people will be like, they're not really a hair band, they're more progressive. And I think case in point is kind of their fall in popularity. It wasn't like the crash that you saw from a lot of those bands. It took time to happen. And as I was researching this album, I started looking into the album before that, and then before that, this is the second album removed from Empire. They had an album, The Promised Land, before this one, which was actually really successful, oddly enough. But kind of getting into it, this is the last album Here in the Now Frontier with Chris DeGarmo as a member of the band. He did contribute on 2003's album Tribe, but in a guest capacity. Again, kind of like when I was talking about Metallica with Load and Reload, it's interesting talking about these bands around this time, because for me, this was probably when I was first getting into them. Like, I wasn't an avid music listener in 1988 or 1990, so the Queensryche that released Operation Mindcrime wasn't the one that existed when I got into the band. It was these guys. A lot of people would just assume commercially that Mindcrime or Empire was kind of the pinnacle of this band, but as far as charting goes, 1994's album Promised Land was actually their highest charting effort on the Billboard 200, reaching number 3. This album, Here in the Now Frontier, didn't do too bad either, made it to number 19. That would be the highest charting success they had on the Billboard 200, with the exception of Operation Mindcrime 2, since the release of this album. Mindcrime 2 made it to number 14. Since then, it's been kind of all over the place. Case in point, they're not their most recent album, but the one before, The Verdict, made it to 110. The album that Jeff Tate released under the Queensryche name, Frequency Unknown, was made it to 82 on the chart. While the self-titled Queensryche, the first album they released without Jeff Tate, made it to 23. So they've kind of been around, but they've not really reached this level of success in a while. Wikipedia points out that Here in the Now Frontier features a more basic, stripped-down musical style, and yeah, that's obviously the case. It's not Mindcrime or Empire, but to me, it was the next logical step after Promised Land, which did not sound like Empire either. I enjoy the less complex Queensryche in large part. I tell you that this album's better than Mindcrime or Empire or Rage for Order? Maybe not, but it's a different sounding band, but I think it still worked. Looking into some of the history around this time, on the tour to support this album, their label EMI went bankrupt and merged with Virgin Records America. After this album, Queensryche would end up on Atlantic Records for an album, and then Sanctuary after that, which is kind of around that same time when Megadeth was on Sanctuary. They were kind of the Frontiers before there was a Frontiers, kind of snatching up a bunch of like metal bands who were kind of past their commercial prime. Wikipedia also points out that this was the last tour that they had where their popularity allowed them to book large venues and amphitheaters, which, again, this is 97, so this is probably well after a lot of those other bands that were popular in that same time had to downsize to clubs and bars. So they kind of hung around a little longer than a lot of the bands that people would lump them in with today. The band obviously still around. They had a falling out with Jeff Tate, replacing him with Todd Latour. They had a falling out with their original drummer, Scott Rockenfield, not long after that. Two original members remain, Eddie Jackson on bass and Michael Wilton on guitars. They're still releasing music. They've kind of rekindled that older sound that I think works really well on their new stuff. Again, I'm more partial to 1990 Queensryche, but it's good to see them still out there doing that. As far as this album goes, there are plenty of standout tracks. Sign of the Times, Cuckoo's Nest, Some People Fly, You, Miles Away, Hit the Black. One thing that I totally forgot that I didn't mark on here, and it just hit me. When this album came out and it was popular and I was getting into them, that was also around the time where Windows was really big into like you downloading like Windows themes and whatnot. And I had this ridiculous Queensryche theme that everything you would do on your computer would make some soundbite noise from Here on the Now Frontier. It was so obnoxious, but that was just one of the weird things we did with computers in the late 90s, and I don't know why. But, this is a solid album. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, that is funny because there was that era of computer usage kind of as I was kind of graduating high school, which would have been the same year this came out, and a little bit beyond. There was just all these weird features that have thankfully since disappeared, but at the time they were just cool. And one of them was themes, like just the whole desktop theme. So you have
your pointer would have some weird shape to it.
Yeah,
instead of the hourglass when it was processing, it would look like something else. That was just something we did.
Yeah, Chris pointing out. He was still doing Windows themes so you could have Chris Jericho plastered on everything in the 2000s. Yeah, it's one of those things that did eventually go away, but just like the Windows blue screen of death is going away, evidently.
I saw a headline about that, but I didn't read into it.
Changing that's kind of sad, but
I'm sure it's still going to be terrible, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what color it is.
That's very true. But, this is a great album. This is probably one of the first albums of theirs that I heard because you listened to it. Interesting that part of it was recorded at Studio Litho in Seattle, which of course was the home studio of Pearl Jam guitarist Stone Gossard, which was kind of interesting. Mixed by Toby Wright, who worked with Alice in Chains. So you could see even at that time that maybe they were thinking like, hey, let's these guys are really popular. Let's maybe try to get a little bit of their influence involved in the album to possibly, as you said, kind of ease their way down the mountain and not just fall off the cliff. And it was probably a smart move.
Well, that's the thing about them, too, is that people always equate Seattle and Washington to grunge. But it's like, that's where Queensryche's from, too. That's where Heart was from. Like Seattle and Washington State had a rich music history before the advent of alternative and grunge. And it's probably not surprising that these guys knew each other even back in the clubbing days, considering how long all of them have been around.
I would imagine it's probably the same feeling that some of the 70s bands that were from like LA kind of felt like when like the glam bands all took credit for the LA scene. It's like, hey, we
music hadn't existed there before that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the same sort of thing. But Queensryche's great. We've talked about the last time we saw them. They sounded great, but probably played a few too many songs that maybe, not that they played too many old songs, but they didn't really play all their big hits, which again, they're at the stage where you're still a greatest hits band, even if you're releasing new music. There's 3 or 4 songs I got to hear if I go to see you, and I don't think they got them all in, but it's great. Jeff Tate is also still out there.
Yeah, and probably worth noting that it seems like they're pretty much at peace now with kind of their split, which is good to see. And Jeff Tate has done some really great work, specifically on Avantasia with Tobias Sammet. Like, that stuff's been really good anytime he's guested there. So, sometimes that many years together, relationships sour, and it's just good to see that you don't see Skid Row articles coming out about Queensryche in 2025.
Everybody's kind of made peace with it, like you said, and it just kind of moved on, and this is where we are.
They're going to be that band that 10 years from now Tate's going to join them on stage for a few songs and everyone's going to be happy. You just feel like that's a possibility.
Yeah, I think so too. But I encourage you to see both of them. If Tate's coming around, if Queensryche's coming around, and they both have been touring pretty extensively, definitely encourage you to check them out.
I think he just extended his Mindcrime
last time he's going to play it.
Yeah.
in total. So definitely worth checking out, and definitely check out Here in the Now Frontier, which is an underrated album as far as Queensryche goes. Definitely check that out from 1997. I am going through the Frontiers bands on Wikipedia. That is what I am doing for the Vault. And we spend 2 weeks on each letter. I pick one, and then I have a randomizer pick next week, which I've not yet done, so I'm not sure who I'm going to get next week. A lot of great H choices for the record. But this was a band that we've talked about before on the podcast. They have a hit song from the 80s that I really like. So I wanted to maybe get a chance to see what they were able to do with Frontiers, because of course they signed with Frontiers at some point. This is the band Hardline, and this is their 2021, their most recent release up to this point, which is Heart, Mind, and Soul. Of course, the original Hardline, people may know, they were founded in 1991 by brothers Johnny and Joey Gioeli. The band consisted of 5 members, the 2 of them, and of course Neil Sean and Dean Castronovo, who you probably better know from Journey, and of course Todd Jensen as well. Had a lot of great stuff, but as it kind of works out, a lot of those guys were involved in a lot of other projects, so there really wasn't a ton of follow-up hits for Hardline beyond Hot Cherie, which was kind of their big hit song. Joey Gioeli has not appeared on the Hardline album since 2002's 2. He retired from music to focus on the family business. Johnny is still there, and he's still the lead singer, which is great to see. He has remained the entire time. Of course, at some point in the early 2010s, I believe, Frontiers came swooping in and said, hey, we want to bring you guys in, and we want to form a new Hardline. And absolutely, why not? So, of course, they do that, and they bring in some very talented musicians, Marco Percudani, Anna Portalupi, and Marco De Salvia joined the band, and of course also joined the band our good friend and yours, Alessandro Del Vecchio, who comes in to do keyboards, background vocals, and production on the new Hardline albums. And then they released this, which was their most recent Frontiers album in 2021. It sounds great. Joey Gioeli still sounds amazing as a lead singer. Definitely, there's really no drop-off there. Probably not surprising based on what we know with Alessandro Del Vecchio, but on April the 6th of this year, Hardline announced they were working on a new studio album, but also announced that they were leaving Frontiers Records, and they had re-signed to SPV/Steamhammer, who also releases Axel Rudy Pell albums, and Gioeli also sings for them as well now. Oh. So kind of makes sense. But again, we know that Alessandro Del Vecchio left Frontiers. I would have to assume that also is the reason why Hardline has left Frontiers as well. The currently untitled new album is scheduled to be released in spring of 2026. I'm very excited to hear what that's going to sound like. But you definitely should check this out, and I would like to go back and listen to more of their stuff to see kind of what they've been able to do in this new era. Standout tracks include Fuel to the Fire, Surrender, Waiting for Your Fall, an 80s moment. But overall, it was good front to back. Hardline, another one of those bands that probably just came into the scene a little bit too late, starting in the early 90s when this type of music was kind of on its way out the door. But it's great that they're still around, even if it is kind of a new iteration of the band besides the lead singer, and excited to see what they come up with their new album coming up next year. I'm sure we will talk about it on the podcast, but always good to kind of spotlight some of those bands from the 90s that are still doing it, and in large part because Frontiers kind of resurrected them somewhere along the line.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought their 92 album Double Eclipse was solid. Obviously Hot Cherie is a great song. Just always great when bands are still out there doing it, and this is no exception.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely check those guys out. That was my H pick for the Frontiers bands, and again, we'll have another H pick coming up next week. And it's time to get to the Power Trio, your weekly hard rock hat trick where we bring up some topic and we will make some picks based on that topic. And before we get to this week's pick, I'm going to get next week's question out there early because, of course, next weekend is 4th of July weekend here in the United States, the American Independence. So the topic for next week is going to be your 3 best songs, biggest songs, favorite songs that have something to do with America. Now, this is a wide net we're going to cast here because that could mean picking a song by Boston. It could mean picking a song that is about America. It could be picking Los Angeles is Burning. You know,
Big GWAR's America Must Be Destroyed.
Absolutely. You know, America Stan from, you know,
Yeah.
it's like there are countless songs that have some, if you can, and that's the one thing, it could be picking the band America. You're 100% right, Chris. Again, you know, when we make these categories, and this week was, I admit, a little challenging, and that's okay. Like, I don't want anybody who's going on this and making these choices, or the folks at home that are listening, to feel constrained by the topic. If you can find any kind of reason to tie it to what we're talking about, like, it's good. Like, there's no judge of the power trio. Like, if you can convince us that like there's a way to get it to the topic, I'm good for it, because that means we're probably going to have more widespread choices because of that. So I'm interested to see what everybody comes up with next week.
Definitely.
But this week, I was listening to a song, and this is typically how these things happen. I hear a song by a band, and I think, you know, this would be an interesting topic, so we went with it. So the topic this week is the top 3 rock and heavy metal bands from the 1980s that would accurately describe your music taste. So if you met a stranger and you were both talking music, and you were like, well, what are you into? But only describe it using bands that had maybe their most success or best known for being a 1980s band as a way to describe what your music tastes are. And again, you know, I know the discussion happened a bit in the Discord, which reminds me, join the Discord. That's a good time for me to plug that. Discussion in the Discord about, well, you know, does this band really count, or whatever it is. Like, you know, I think these topics are open for a lot of interpretation. And again, I don't think anybody's going to be grading people's work on, you know, well, you know, that band only had one album in the 80s or whatever it may be. Like, if you get the vibe that it's an 80s band, then I say you're good there. Or if there's a way to say, like, yeah, but maybe their best stuff was in the 70s, but I got into them in the 80s because of this album that came out in the 80s, and therefore that describes, you know, I think that's completely good. So I feel like this is another topic that might have been a little difficult, but I do feel like there's a lot of leeway to pick a lot of different bands that we could just kind of assume are 80s. So with that said, and my disclaimer out of the way, I know Shane had some picks. I know you said in the Discord that maybe they were, you know, tangent. You know, I don't know
I don't know if the way I worded the question was confusing. I don't feel like it was. Let's see.
That's okay. I mean, part of the fun is maybe that it's not exactly right, and that's all right.
I feel like I pretty much typed it the way you typed it in the Discord.
Maybe I didn't word it well.
If you were trying to explain to a stranger your music taste, what 3 80s rock or metal bands would you use? They don't have to be exclusive to the 80s, but need to be best known for their work during that decade.
Fair enough. I think that's pretty reasonable. So
What I end up getting from Shane.
All right, give us Shane's
There's one that I picked as well, and I'll go ahead and say it, but there's kind of, I feel like you could both think it's a good pick and a bad pick depending on your perspective, but that is Metallica.
That's fair.
He also picked Queen, which I think are more 70s, personally. I think they existed throughout the 80s, but I think most of the hits that you're going to identify with are going to be the 70s stuff, and in large part.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, you know, I was just trying to think in my head, like, you know, what albums they had in the 80s. What were their singles?
The Flash Gordon soundtrack, I think.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Like, list of songs recorded by Queen. Okay, so, wow, why is that not in year order? That was really terrible.
Another One Bites the Dust came out in 80, evidently.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, Crazy Little Thing Called Love
was 79, so, I mean, that was right there. You said the Flash Gordon soundtrack is there.
Under Pressure probably would have been 80s.
Playing the Game. Under Pressure was 1981.
Okay.
Radio Gaga, 1984. Princess of the Universe, 1986. Who Wants to Live Forever, 1986.
That probably makes it fair then, because Princess of the Universe is a great song.
Yeah, like that's really good. And even Show Must Go On, 1991, Innuendo, 1991. So, but yeah, I think we can say that's okay. I get, because when I think of Queen, I think of the classic albums from the 70s.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's okay. I think we can give him that one.
Okay, so the other one that I think is totally passable just because of his soundtrack work is Stan Bush.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of hard to argue that one. The other two are probably more egregious than Queen, and which lead me to think maybe he didn't fully understand the topic. Dream Theater.
Yeah, like I don't think they're 80s. Like
I think they formed in the late 80s, but
85 actually.
Their first quote unquote hit was in 92.
Yeah. Because they had a James LaBrie in 1990, 91.
Their first album came out in 89. I don't think a lot of people were necessarily keying on that as, man, that's why I love this band.
I mean, maybe. He's just ahead of his time, I guess.
Quite possibly.
When Dream and Day Unite was 1989.
Yeah. But it's Images and Words is kind of the first one you think about with them, with Pull Me Under, Another Day.
Yeah.
Take the Time.
All right, fair enough. Maybe that one doesn't quite make the cut. But
the other one almost feels like a troll because, this band did start in the 80s, but they don't. After they kind of changed their sound, they kind of disavowed that entire period of the 80s. If you were to ask them when their debut came out, they would say 1990, which is not true. But unfortunately, the band is not. They're still around, but not really, given the two brothers that started it are no longer with us. But that is Pantera.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because if you tell me you're into that stuff from the 80s, then that makes it a kind of a legitimate choice.
It's entirely possible there are people that like the 80s Pantera that didn't like Phil Anselmo's and kind of that heavier direction they went into in the 90s.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That does feel like...
I just wonder. But it made for an interesting pick as far as something to talk about.
For sure. So some people might be on board with that. I don't know. But interesting choices for sure. Chris has his picks in the chat as well. What did Chris have for us for his three?
Yeah, so he went with Judas Priest.
That's fair.
Can't argue with that. I mean, they were also 70s as well, but man, they did some really good stuff in the 80s. Van Halen, not Van Hagar. Fair. I mean, Van Hagar took over after 1984, but when you think of 80s bands, you think Van Halen with David Lee Roth.
Kind of quintessential, I would say.
And finally, the Police.
Police is a good choice. It's funny because I didn't pick Van Halen, but honestly, I would probably, for my music taste, would pick Van Hagar over Van Halen because of... You think of the type of songs that they released, that's probably a little more in line of the type of music. I'm not saying they were better as Van Hagar, but just I think that lines up more with the type of music I like than Van Halen.
I think Van Halen was a better rock band.
Yes.
But I think Van Hagar wrote better songs.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Kind of weird.
But good choices for sure. And I think there's no lawyering needed for any of those. I think those are all pretty reasonable. So what do you have for us?
So I mentioned first Metallica, and kind of my justification for that is, and it's kind of the same reason I didn't pick Megadeth. Metallica, their biggest album came out in the 90s, the Black Album.
Yes.
Same with Megadeth, Rust in Peace, came out in 90. But with Metallica, you have that set of hardcore fans that think their best work happened before the Black Album.
Yeah, very true.
They truly think that Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice for All is kind of the pinnacle of Metallica, and everything else after that is sell out, whatever. I don't feel that way, but it's hard to argue that they're not... That some of their most influential work happened in the 80s.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, and I think for some metal fans, they would disavow anything that came in the 90s and beyond.
There are those. There are the people that kind of have the cutoff post-Black Album. There are varying degrees of when you think Metallica lost it. I enjoy all of it, minus maybe Saint Anger. Meanwhile, with Megadeth, I didn't pick them because... You're not going to look at Rust in Peace and suggest that they were better before Rust in Peace.
Right.
Killing's My Business, great debut album. Peace Sells is great. So Far So Good So What is fine, but man, like Rust in Peace, Countdown to Extinction, Euthanasia, like it's just
Then if we do this question again with the 90s, I think that's a slam dunk there.
Yeah, to me, Rust in Peace is Megadeth's Master of Puppets.
Yeah.
Really.
I would agree with that.
So yeah, that's why I didn't go that route. I thought Metallica qualified in my mind, but not so much Megadeth. For my number 2, this is a weird one because they only had a couple albums, 3 I think in the 80s, and they're still around today. But over a stretch of 2 albums, they have the majority of what I would consider to be their greatest hits. So, and I think to casual fans, they would also think that, and that's Halloween.
Yeah. I mean,
it seems cruel because you have Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 in 1987, Part 2 in 88. But among those 2 albums, you have I'm Alive, A Little Time, A Tale That Wasn't Right, Future World, Halloween, Eagle Fly Free, Dr. Steen, I Want Out, Keeper of the Seven Keys. Just so many just epic songs in such a short period of time. I don't know if they've ever really been able to outdo that work. And it's not, I love everything they've done for the most part. And I still think of that as kind of the pinnacle.
It's hard to argue with that. Like, if there's, I mean, they've had a lot of great stuff over the years, but as far as like what decade you would associate them with, I mean, I think the 80s are it because of, like you said, I think there's those 2 albums that really kind of stand apart from the other ones. But yeah, I think that's a completely reasonable pick.
So for number 3, I realized there's a whole genre of music that basically that I get into that's heavy or heavy-ish, I suppose, considered metal to some degree, that pretty much had its start and stop in the 80s, and that's any number of the quote-unquote hair bands I enjoyed. So I end up picking Rat for this. Obviously, the biggest albums of their career pretty much all happened in the 80s. I have 84, Out of the Cellar, 85, Invasion of Your Privacy, 86, Dancing Undercover, 88, Reach for the Sky, and then kind of 1990, Detonator, just missed the cut. But that was pretty much the majority of their greatest hits, and they had some amazing songs, all kind of encapsulated in that 6 or 7 year period.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, very, very legitimate pick there, I think. And it is nice you can find a hair band that kind of lines up there because, like you said, a lot of them kind of had those hits in the early 90s as kind of in the late days of hair metal, but this is an example of one that was more mid to late 80s. So,
and very similar honorable mention, Dokken.
Yeah.
Like
that name crossed my mind.
Between Breaking the Chains, Tooth and Nail, Under Lock and Key, and Back for the Attack between 83 and 87. You know, Breaking the Chains, Tooth and Nail, Just Got Lucky, Into the Fire, Alone Again, Unchain the Night, The Hunter, In My Dreams, It's Not Love, Kiss of Death, Heaven Sent, Mr. Scary, Burning Like a Flame, Dream Warriors. A lot of great songs.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really, like you said, that name crossed my mind as I was going through this. And I think that would be a really, really good choice that would line up with both of our music tastes, as it turns out. But yeah, really good stuff. Really good picks there. 2 of my 3 picks are kind of more on the softer rock side, but obviously that does kind of line up with the music I listen to. The first one being Huey Lewis and the News. That was the band that popped up in my YouTube that made me think of this category.
Sure.
Obviously, you look at the albums in the early 80s. Picture This, which included Do You Believe in Love, Working for a Living. Heart and Soul came out in 1983. Then you had Sports with that on there. I Want a New Drug, The Heart of Rock and Roll, If This Is It, Walking on a Thin Line. Of course, the Back to the Future soundtrack in 85 with The Power of Love and Back in Time. 86, you got 4 with Stuck With You, Hip to Be Square, Jacob's Ladder, Doing It All for My Baby, Perfect World with On Small World in 1988. Really, all their big hits came there in that stretch of the 1980s. And to me, I'm a huge fan of, obviously, lots of different types of rock, but I've always been a fan of rock that incorporates, woodwinds, saxophones. I've always been a fan, even dating back to Chicago. But again, I see Chicago as more of a 70s band. Yeah, they have their hits of the 80s, but to me, like classic Chicago is the 1970s.
I don't know. I feel like they're kind of a Van Halen. They are a depending on what you like about them, you might feel differently.
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely that. There's the Peter Cetera era of the early 1980s that you could make an argument for as well. But so I went with Huey Lewis again just because of all those mega hits in the 80s. Duran Duran was my second pick. Again, another pop rock band that was just really, really good. But we already talked about the Union of the Snake. But you go back to Rio came out in 1981. Or actually, Duran Duran came out in 1981, but then you had Rio in 1982 with Hungry Like the Wolf, and Rio and Save a Prayer, which is a great song. Non-album single was Is There Something I Should Know in 1983. Seven and the Ragged Tiger came out in 1983, which included New Moon on Monday, The Reflex, Union of the Snake. You had View to a Kill coming out in 1985 off the movie soundtrack. Notorious came out in 1986 with Notorious, Skin Trade. Big Thing was 88 with All She Wants Is. I Don't Want Your Love. So, I mean, again, another band that just a bunch of mega hits right there through the 1980s.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a better just 80s pop rock band than Duran Duran. They check every box as far as just that poppiness. That they were rock enough to not be something I don't want to listen to.
Yeah,
but they were definitely very much pop oriented. But man, so talented.
And to bring our podcast full circle, because I picked two kind of pop rock bands to start with, I wanted to go with something a little more on the metal side. So I went with Iron Maiden as my third choice because when you think of the type of metal music I pick on this podcast, what does it have in common? It's, your catchy guitars, your catchy songs, but maybe more than anything else, it's powerful vocals, it's melodic vocals. And I would argue that there are very few bands of the 80s that did it better than Bruce Dickinson did for Iron Maiden. And to me, that when you're looking at a metal band, that's kind of what I look for. And of course, starts right out in 1982 with Number of the Beast came out, and Hallowed Be Thy Name, The Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, maybe one of my all-time favorite metal songs by any band. Then The Trooper in 1983, you had Flight of Icarus on Peace of Mind in 1983, which carried over, I think, into early, that did wrap up in 83 with The Trooper there. 2 Minutes to Midnight on Power Slave in 1984. 2
Minutes to Midnight's a great song.
Aces High in 1984. Again, you just go through Stranger in a Strange Land in 1986 is Somewhere in Time. Wasted Years on Somewhere in Time in 1986. Can I Play with Madness off Seventh Son of the Seventh Son in 1988. The Clairvoyant, The Evil That Men Do, Infinite Dreams. Again, another band that just had just mega hits in the 1980s, but again, the type of metal band that I probably like most, the one that has the melodic vocals that just absolutely pull you out of your seat. And again, just kind of fitting because we still open the show talking about them, that we wrap up with Iron Maiden.
Yeah, just obviously a tremendous band. I think, a lot of the other bands that you enjoy, there's a good amount of them whose vocalist is trying to be Bruce Dickinson, essentially. I think that's definitely a thing. And as far as them kind of feeling like an 80s band, I think obviously them starting in 80, bringing in Dickinson in 82, and then him leaving before their release in 95, The X Factor, I think that just kind of cemented that feeling that they're in that slot, even though he came back and they ultimately released Brave New World, and he's been there ever since, which, I mean, that was a good album too. Wicker Man's a great song, and they've had good stuff since. But yeah, when you see them on tour and you look at their set list, so much of it is just rooted in that pocket. In that story we talked about, looking at that set list, like them closing with Wasted Years, like what a great track to end your set. Like that is just so. It's might be their best song.
Yeah,
to be totally honest.
Could be,
but you're splitting hairs because there's so many great ones. But yeah, just amazing band, and they did some amazing work in the 80s.
Yeah, so those are my picks, and again, I think a lot of really good choices. Jump into our Discord. It's linked in the chat right now on YouTube and Twitch. Let us know who your 3 80s bands would be that describe your music. We'll revisit this category maybe with the 90s, and we can use some of Shane's picks then, and maybe even the 70s. Again, just to try to kind of mix it up a little bit. Again, next week we're going to be talking about 3 favorite songs that have something to do with America. It's a very wide topic, so I expect a lot of variety in our answers, but it'll be really curious to see what everybody comes up with. But that is just about going to do it on this episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Kind of a lengthy episode, but a lot of really good discussion this week. So hopefully you enjoyed it as well. A lot of great music from June the 6th to check out. Definitely encourage you to do that. Lots of really good stuff this week. We'll be back less than 24 hours from now with another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. We'll get you caught up on all the nerdy news coming up 7 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. And then we'll be back 1 week from tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Next Sunday, the music of June the 13th will be on the playlist for next week's Hard Rock Empire. Big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat. Big thanks to Shane for passing along his picks. Big thanks to Mike, as always, for the work he does on this podcast. Big thanks to you as well, whenever and wherever you're listening. And a big thanks to Stoveleg Media for their continued support. That's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll see you tomorrow night for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.